Drawing inspiration from her We Are Developers talk, I had the brilliant opportunity to sit down with Amanda Lamont from the team at NIME to discuss what actually makes a talent acquisition manager. Giving all of those who are maybe interested by this career path a little sneak peek into the true job that it entails. Not just focusing on the good parts, but also the parts that maybe you want to know before taking that step up. Here's a little sneak peek from what our conversation was a few weeks back.
I think a lot of us have been taught to think that this is the natural next step, that if you want to advance in your career, that you should become a people manager. And I think that's not just true. It's not true. It has mainly been a product of there not being a proper path carved out for individual contributors. You become a senior recruiter and that's it. Then you have to head up a team, department, etc. And that's the way you have to go forward. And with it being the natural next step, it seems that a lot of people step into the role without really knowing what's involved and the effort that goes into it, and also the trials and tribulations that come with the role as well. So it could be a training, it could be just your general day-to-day management style with your team. Regularly ask for feedback. Do a little pulse check that you send out anonymously and use that to constantly improve, even in your one-on-ones. Don't be too proud to ask for feedback or be afraid that it's going to make you look weak.
Amanda's brilliant. She's had an opportunity to lead teams. She's also been an individual contributor. Over the last 14 years, she worked with some pretty high-profile companies. So getting the chance to sit down with her to talk about a topic that she's particularly interested in based on personal experience, it was a brilliant chance. We covered everything from things such as creating an open and learning culture to feedback scenarios, which can be quite awkward at times, imposter syndrome, actionable steps, which can help people step into their journey into leadership. This is going to be one of those episodes that if you're umming and ahhing about where you want to take your career in talent acquisition, you're not sure if it's down the individual contributor route, the leadership route, then this is going to be one of those opportunities where you can listen to someone who's been there, done it recently to determine whether or not that is a path that excites you. And I would say it's a nice accompaniment to a previous episode of ours where Andrea discussed the principal recruitment route. So thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour, I'm going to be joined by a seasoned recruiter and leader with a passion for solving seemingly impossible puzzles. With nearly 14 years of experience in technology TA, he's worked with renowned teams from Amazon and Zalando to Adidas and her current team at NIME. After relocating her life from South Africa to Germany, she's continued to make significant strides in the talent community, exploring in more depth her recent talk from the We Are Developers conference. I am genuinely thrilled to share the podcast with her and to tackle today's topic. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, the senior recruiter at NIME, Amanda Lamont. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction.
Well, I did borrow most of it from your LinkedIn, which was quite nicely well written, which always makes life a lot easier. But like I said, there's always helpful when people write and fill in their stuff. There's a lot to cover because, like I said, you've recently done a talk at We Are Developers, and we're going to use that as kind of the basis of this. Because clearly, obviously, it's something you wanted to share to those that wanted to listen. So we'll get into that in a second. But you're the last person of this series, which means you're the last person to answer this kind of icebreaker question. And it's around artificial intelligence. Probably people are listening. We're 8 episodes into this one. They're probably bored of me asking this question. So hopefully we get a solid final answer. So from your perspective, Amanda, where does AI have a place in the TA kind of ecosystem?
I think it feels like a bit of a no-brainer, but for the benefit of AI really is that it's now helping us to get rid of all of these operational tasks that we've had that have been bogging us down, which, it was preventing us from being true partners to the business, really focusing on the meat of our role as opposed to the admin. And I think AI can really automate a lot of that and free up our time to do more value add work. I don't think that we should really buy into the rhetoric that, oh, AI is going to take all our jobs. There's something about the human experience that you can't take away from recruitment. And I think it's a tool to make us more efficient, but it's not completely going to eliminate the value that we bring.
I think that's quite the consensus that everyone's kind of shared now, which is really nice to hear. Because I think if you go back 6 to 12 months ago, and it's not that AI hasn't been around, it's just become more publicly accessible. And everyone's like, oh my God, this is it, the end of the world. And even like in software engineering and design, everyone's thinking the same thing, but it hasn't had that impact. I mean, I still use it just to create stupid images half the time. But I do agree 110%. It is one of those elements that we should use it as a tool. We shouldn't rely on it as a tool. But the topic of today, so we were discussing what makes a talent acquisition manager. So all the components from your perspective that kind of someone in this role should be able to possess or kind of bring forward with it. But before we kind of go into that, why is it even important from your perspective that those that are listening, be it I just stepped into the role today or interested in stepping into this role into the future, why is it important to have a clear idea of what actually makes up a TA manager?
I think a lot of us have been taught to think that this is the natural next step, that if you want to advance in your career, that you should become a people manager. And I think that's not just true. It's not true. It has mainly been a product of there not being a proper path carved out for individual contributors. You become a senior recruiter and that's it. Then you have to head up a team, department, etc. And that's the way you have to go forward. And with it being the natural next step, it seems that a lot of people step into the role without really knowing what's involved and the effort that goes into it, and also the trials and tribulations that come with the role as well. And I think more people need to talk about how you can grow into the role, not just stepping into it with zero insights, but how do you grow into that role? I've seen in a lot of employee engagement surveys that they feel their leaders are too inexperienced. They don't know how to be good managers. And sometimes it's not necessarily the person's fault. It could be because they were simply ill prepared for the role. No one told them what it was going to be like, and the deer caught in headlights. And that was the point of my talk, really, was to discuss with those who want to follow that path or even didn't want the path, that it's not as easy as it looks.
Yeah. I love the fact that you kind of came with this idea as well. So there's a lady in Berlin, you know her, Andrea. I think you guys used to work together at Zalando. And she did take the path on principal recruiter. And this kind of, it very nicely balances out what her thought process is around continue down that IC route. And now this is kind of the second part of, okay, that isn't the route for you, or you're not sure, you want to test out the management side. It's kind of, it would be nice for people to listen to both. So from your perspective, what are kind of the key pillars that we need to be looking in, or that you kind of discovered when you're presenting your talk?
So firstly, I want to preface this with the fact that I am not, let's say, a seasoned people manager. I don't have decades under the belt of experience. It's really my account of having been a new manager with just sprinkling of experience and wanting to speak about, wow, this was actually bloody hard. And I think the key things really that you need to be open to or look out for is be open to admitting that you know nothing. Like you absolutely, you haven't stepped into this role. You think you know what you're doing because you've been watching your manager all the years. Just accept that you don't know anything, and then endeavor to always seek feedback, not just from your superiors, but also from your team members, from your colleague, because that is essentially what makes you better. So I usually say that feedback isn't a gift, it's necessary. Another quality I would say is that you have to be curious and always learning. So not only rely on your own experiences, but learn from others, read a lot. There are a lot of great resources out there. Actually, the name of this talk really was inspired by the Making of a Manager book by Julie Zhou. I have to still see if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
I'll confirm it on the footnotes.
Okay, great. And yeah, reading other people's experiences, Harvard Business Review, they've got a great leadership series. And this is how you're going to get better. Stay curious, also network with a lot of others. Even the VPs, the stakeholders that you work with, they've been immensely helpful as well. And it's very comforting to hear that they still have imposter syndrome even after 10, 20, 30 years. So yeah, that would be my first nuggets.
Well, we'll break them into each part because although obviously we're saying that be curious to learning, network, there's still so much you can do with inside that. I'm keen to pick specific parts out that have helped you because you can say although you've kind of gone down this route and you've tried it, there's going to be methods kind of from your side where it maybe didn't go right straight away, and that's kind of the part we want to get to as well.
Yeah.
So let's start with learning. It's cool for you. Why is it important to kind of have that curious mindset? Why is that one of the core skills for you? Stepping into that TA manager role.
The learning, I would say, is because no one is telling you what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Managers don't know everything. We are tasked with making our teams happy, making our stakeholders happy, and no one's actually looking out for us. Mm-hmm. Sounds weird, but it's true. So who else is going to enrich your experience and grow you but yourself? And this is something that you actually need to make time for. Personally, I like to do this in the morning while I'm starting kind of checking the emails. I'm also having a scan of LinkedIn, other websites like I mentioned, Harvard Business Review, and read articles that really stick out to me, or sometimes having an update sent to me every morning that I can scan, or if it's particularly interesting, read in depth later. But no one's going to be looking out for you and making you read XYZ. You have to go out there with this hunger, with this curiosity.
So with the learning development side, you obviously mentioned that you time outside in the morning, you had Harvard Business Review. How did you find what to learn on? Because you step into this role and you're right, you don't always know what you're doing. But you've got people leadership, you've got career planning, you've got recruitment still to do, you've got all these tools around you and all these things you need to learn. How do you decide what's actually worth your time to invest in and what's not?
Believe it or not, I have found people on LinkedIn that I admire, and I look at the content that they share, and I just go down a rabbit hole. So it could be people like Arianna Huffington, Melinda Gates, Julie Zhou, that are constantly sharing a lot of information, either their own blog posts. It could also be peers of mine, other people in the industry that are also well known. I also like to share a lot of these links with my stakeholders, believe it or not. And they would then in turn share links with me as well. So it becomes this asynchronous conversation actually of information sharing. And that's really how I choose to do that. Also, we have women in leadership webinars as well at previous companies of mine. But I really feel that if you can find someone that you really admire and follow their content, it will lead you to other more stimulating content.
By the way, I'm a massive believer in all of that, in the sense of following people on LinkedIn. That's exactly what I do. And I think there's like 15 people. I've bookmarked their profiles, and every week I'm going to them, doing the old stalking side of things. But they're really good at kind of just showing you things that maybe you're not used to, kind of in your bubble. And getting inside your bubble, or actually getting out of your bubble, is the best thing you can do. I struggled with this quite a lot personally when I was leading a larger team in my former company. And that was kind of finding the balance of projecting confidence as a leader, people buying into you, when you have absolutely no idea what the answers are. And, that is for me, I've really struggled because then I kind of defaulted to, oh, I'm good at recruitment. I'll just fall into that. But I sucked at certain parts and didn't know how to kind of get out of that. So I don't
Yeah,
know. Did you experience that yourself, or am I alone? Please don't tell me
I
I'm alone.
did. I did. And the scary thing is that people can sense it. They sniff it out
Yeah.
like a truffle pig. They can hear your panic. And I find that this usually happens when there's a tough message that you have to give, but without sharing all of the details.
Mm.
And your team can feel this somewhat disingenuous, sympathetic message where you're not telling the whole story. And that leads into this feeling of, oh, okay, leadership's not being very transparent with us. It's one of, the most voted for characteristics that people are usually upset with or dissatisfied with at their company. And I think here you just need to be very frank with your team. It's not necessarily allowed most of the time as a leader, but don't pretend to know what people are feeling, and delivering a message in a way that you think is acceptable. You should be asking people more, what do they feel? What are their concerns, and take it from there instead of just communicating purely top down. And that's
Yeah.
something I experienced when I got feedback from my team that I wasn't always giving them the whole picture. I wasn't communicating the truth to them. And it's not that I wasn't being truthful, it's that I felt quite shackled, shall we say, by need to know information or how that information needed to be packaged for my teams that I didn't necessarily agree with, but I had to stick to the script. And
Yeah.
it was very awkward.
It is tough in the sense of you stepping into that management role for the first time. There's so many first times, and rarely do you get them all right. Actually, you hardly get them all right. So it's only about learning. But then you make a disastrous bad move when the first few times, then the team, as you say, sniff out, and it's really challenging to kind of come back. We'll come back into how we can kind of, I guess, rectify that at a later point, kind of strategies for people stepping into this role. But yeah, I'm curious as well, because you mentioned, obviously, feedback is not a gift, it's a necessity, right? Or it's necessary,
It's
rather.
necessary.
That's the phrase. Okay,
Yeah,
explain to you what we mean.
I just said it. I didn't make it up. Yeah.
Well, what do we mean by that?
I mean that feedback shouldn't arrive at your door every now and then, and that you should feel grateful for it. You should be looking for the feedback. You go out and you hunt for it. And this is really what will feed your constant growth. I had a lot of assumptions about what I thought was doing, what I was doing well, and what others could see, just face value. They saw, oh, Amanda's giving this webinar or that talk, or she's delivering this training. It looks really good, but are people actually getting value from it? So it could be a training. It could be just your general day-to-day management style with your team. Regularly ask for feedback. Do a little pulse check that you send out anonymously, and use that to constantly improve, even in your one-on-ones. Don't be too proud to ask for feedback or be afraid that it's going to make you look weak.
Yeah. So you built this directly into your processes then. So they say one-to-ones. So you're doing this, I guess, did you do it organically because you felt you wasn't getting enough feedback? Or was you told by your manager, hey, you need to be doing this more? Or how did it kind of work? Because, I think from when you was a manager, from you was in a large organization, there's a lot more structure around you. But I'm also thinking about people who may be stepping into this for the first time in a smaller company where they don't have that support network, I guess, as much. So who drove the desire to seek feedback more proactively?
So I was in quite a large company, and the first thing I could think of was to ask peers for help. And I wanted to know, okay, how are you doing things? Because my manager at the time wasn't necessarily very supportive or hands-on in terms of the growth. They knew I didn't have experience coming into it, but I was kind of swimming alone, which was not expected. So I reached out to peers who had been doing this for some time and asked them, okay, how are you structuring, in terms of roadmaps, one-on-ones, team monthly business reviews, etc. And they suddenly opened up this beautiful structure of all the things that they check up on a monthly basis, be it on a team or individual level. And I thought, wow, this is the structure that I was looking for. And this is amazing. Yeah. Why isn't everyone doing this? Still, though, it's kind of a check mark, right? Like, okay, I've done these one-on-ones, this quarterly business review, et cetera, et cetera. Am I doing it well? And I'd say that we had this quarterly employee happiness or employee satisfaction survey. And even though I was doing a pulse check with my team, the results that I was getting from even though anonymous, it was still a small team. So everyone probably still felt insecure to give honest feedback. But what I was getting in my pulse checks was not what I was seeing in the employee satisfaction survey. And I just could not for the life of me figure out, like, what am I doing that, there's this huge discrepancy. And this was really scary. So what I did was I sought feedback, and I knew that there were some teams that were conducting leadership team feedback surveys. That was actually a workshop, really, conducted by the business partner, where you would have each person in the team, as well as the manager, would fill out a survey, what they think they're doing well, what needs to be stopped, what needs to change. And we could compare the results side by side. And there were a lot of things that I thought were great, but my team was not very happy about. And it was really surprising to me, actually. I go into this in my talk, and I was really not prepared for this. The next step was to have a session where the business partner, without me present, would speak to them about these different aspects, and then bring me on, kind of like a Jerry Springer show. It feels like they bring me on and they get to confront me about it, and I get to ask questions. Yeah. The point is not to be confrontational, but rather I can ask them questions to dig more into what it means, but not there to defend myself, just information gathering. And then I would basically go away, develop an action plan on how I'm going to improve that, and then measure that on monthly, quarterly, whatever we decide on basis. But it was a huge slap in the face. And that was my idea to do the workshop, based on, what I was seeing, this discrepancy between my own check and the quarterly survey. And after doing that, the next time we had a quarterly survey, my team's satisfaction had jumped up by 25 percentage points, which is a massive improvement quarter on quarter. And doing that feedback workshop was something that I requested. If I didn't look for it and say, hold on, there's something massively wrong here, if I didn't look for that workshop, look for their feedback in a really honest, brutal way, I wouldn't have been able to make this improvement.
Well, that's stepping into the world of radical candor, isn't it? It's that yes. Real honest feedback.
So good.
I did it once before I left the former company, and it bruises your ego. It does. I mean, I know, to be transparent, right? Everyone does have an ego to some degree. As much as we don't want to have one, we have one. But it does, because you think, I'm shit hot at that. And then they're like, nope. Or at least the perception they have, or how you have, is just, It's just a slight variant. My only advice on anyone who's listening, thinking of that, and you might have it, you need to be sure of who you are as a person before you have those meetings, because you might hear things that you don't want to hear, and you might respond in a way you shouldn't respond as a manager. Because I've heard stories where people get their backs up in those meetings, and it just ends into chaos.
Maybe my team was just super amazing. They were honest, for sure. And I think the aim really is, you might not feel like you can trust your feelings and whether you're going to just burst out in anger in the meeting. My advice is to ask questions, not give answers or volunteer information. Just ask questions if anything is unclear. Don't seek to provide a response. That response can come later. Just ask questions.
Yeah.
But for me, what was the most rewarding thing here, I thought I was doing something that was super necessary if I wanted things to get better in my team. So I knew I just had to suck it up and do it.
Yeah.
And afterwards, one of my team reached out to me over a chat and said, Amanda, I just want to know, are you okay? I said, yes. I can't imagine how you're feeling right now. That must have been so tough for you. And I wanted to laugh and also cry at the same time because I was thinking, yeah, but it's my job. But it was so sweet that I had someone actually reach out and say, that was really brave. I'm so, impressed or whatever that you did this of your own accord. And they really appreciate it. And here I just thought it was my job.
Part.
Yes.
Yeah, but
the angels sang and the heavens opened up.
No, but you say it should be part of your job, but so many people are insecure about asking those questions because they've always been in environments where you can't be like that. And fortunately, you felt safe enough around your team to do it. Your team felt safe enough to respond in a professional way. But like I said, there's been many examples of where that doesn't happen. It's about, if you don't put yourself out there and try and find that feedback, you're never going to know if that environment is really right for you anyway as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find that it just becomes a personal attack, then I think you found your answer, that you should probably move on because it's not the right place for you long term anyways. But it's a really, really valuable trait as a leader to have, is being happy to put yourself in the firing line in terms of feedback, actively seeking it out. Like I said, most people don't do this in the first few years ever. They just kind of shelter away in terms of, I think I know what I'm doing. And then they kind of comes to this realization that actually I probably do need a bit more feedback.
On that point though, and sorry to interrupt you, but maybe it also leads into one of your other questions. It is a massive blow to your pride.
100%.
And it will, I wouldn't say it's necessarily not the place for you if it's going to, really kind of make you red in the face and you can't take it. I think most people can't take it.
That's on that scenario of if the feedback is a personal attack and it's not done with growth in mind, i.e. your team are just attacking you for, they're not giving you criticism that you can grow with. It's just criticism because they're unhappy with a decision that's been made and they want to take out their anger on you. That's not the right way that these are conducted. There needs to be something tangible that you can take away, not just be a punching bag for an hour. That's
why you have a mediator, right? Or not a moderator, shall I say, that has to keep the conversation on track.
Yeah. So, I mean, on that point, and how did you ensure that feedback then is perceived as a valuable tool across you and your whole across your whole team? How did you kind of encourage them to open up and be honest?
Well, a big thing that helped was that I wasn't there.
True.
But
I mean, post that meeting, then did it become more open after that?
I think so. I think that people saw I was willing to put myself out there and be vulnerable and be exposed. I think people always think twice about giving feedback like that, but I think just taking that first step meant a lot. And the next time they had more confidence to say, well, actually, I'm not really happy about that, or I don't feel comfortable doing that, or I'm not very happy about, what you said back then. I think some people have more guts than others, but when they see you also being vulnerable, it becomes easier for them. And it certainly did. I felt a lot closer to my team as well. And like they were more forgiving of me as well, because they knew that we had that two-way communication.
I also think as well, like there's this unwritten rule of like, as soon as you become a manager, everyone thinks you're on the dark side, as it were, right? You're no longer part of us. You're part of the corporate jargon, that sort of things. And it's just like being, actually, no, I'm still the same person, but I also do need to kind of tell you that you need to perform better here or whatever. But it's just like this
Yeah.
automatic rule of, I think someone said like you're going to lose all the friends around you. Like, I don't think it needs to happen. I think the relationship changes. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think you need to lose friendships out of it. I think it just needs to become a different type of working partnership. Then I mean, a lot of the people I used to lead are friends today, but I mean, we've moved on, and I guess it's easier when you don't work for the same company anymore. But yeah, I
I think
think
maybe
oh,
yeah, perhaps it's also how long you were colleagues for versus friends
yeah,
versus
the longer I think it's the harder.
there's this almost like a sweet spot that either you're before that or you're too far past it, that it's just
Yeah,
not going to work. And especially if you are in a directly competing role, shall we say, and for the same position, just not everyone can get past that,
yeah.
especially if they're vying for the same role. I think that
The one
it's,
of you has to lose
I
out
don't have an
eventually, and
answer
then
for
it.
that. I don't have
No,
an
if
answer
someone
for
does,
that.
please tell us. I mean, to be fair, Mark, my business partner, we were vying for the same position, and we both left and then set up Heritage
Mm,
together. That was our solution. It
yeah.
wasn't fight for the same role. It was just go set up a new company. It doesn't work for everyone, I guess, though. Um, you use the phrase imposter syndrome. Of course, it's not something that's new, right? I think everyone
Mhm.
and their mum has heard of imposter syndrome now. Um, instead of talking about what it is, because we know what it is, right? But what advice would you give to talent professionals who are maybe just setting out on this journey into management, who experience it? Because we all experience it, right? But we experience it at different points, highs and lows, and sometimes it comes and goes really, really quickly. But what advice would you kind of suggest based on being there yourself at some point?
Bask in it. Bask in the glory of imposter syndrome. Just let it wash over you. No, I'm kidding. I think reach out to people. You need to have a mentor, internal and external. It's very important because we think that the bubble we're in is the be all and end all. But there
Yeah,
are other companies out there. You may leave and go to another company. There is life
there's quite a
outside
few
of
as
where
well.
you've been. And so have someone internal because they know the struggle you have
Hmm.
personally, but also external. And also, hopefully, if you have peers that are managing side by side with you, speak to each other. It can be about the smallest thing, and just to hear that someone else has that exact same problem, it's such a relief to know that you're not alone. Or
Yeah,
you can learn from each other's experiences. Like, oh, yes, I once also I had one case where I was pretty sure I was either going to have to put someone on a performance management plan or part ways with them. I'd never done this before. I didn't know if I was preparing them in the right way, supporting in the right way. And I just reached out to one of my peers and they said, you know what, I had exactly the same thing. And this is what I
yeah,
did and what the outcome was. And it just gave me such a sense of relief because, and also to other managers I knew that had done something similar. It didn't even have to be in my department, it could have been a stakeholder. And you just don't feel so alone anymore. And like I said, it's so comforting to hear that they have the same insecurities. It's not very comforting to know that it's still going to happen to me in 20 years' time, but nonetheless, you realize, okay, you don't have to be perfect, and that's okay, even
yeah.
after many many years.
I think getting out of the bubble is probably the biggest thing. I think I would also go to people because there's there's a world of information, and everyone has done it. Everyone, right? Whatever you're going through, it's probably been done. Like, it's really, really. I mean, actually, I've never had an alone experience with anything that I needed help with. There's three Slack channels that I'm in, which two are for TA. So one's called Talent Crunch. You're actually going to kill me now if I say it wrong. So that's Andrea's one,
Talent
Talent
crunch
Crunch.
now, yes.
Yeah, and then the other one is the Talent Community. So I'll tag both of them in this.
TTC, yes.
TTC. So they're the two that if I have any talent acquisition query question, and obviously you're an internal TA, I'm an external, they do not care. It's all love in that group or in those groups, and it's
Mhm.
supportive, real supportive environment. The other one is Rand's leadership, which is more tech focused, CTOs, heads of, but same thing. Although I'm a recruiter,
Okay.
if I have any questions about something, I just throw it in there,
Great.
and people always are open. And like, if it's a good enough question, and not just like wishy-washy,
What's a
you're
good
doing.
enough question?
Well, some people just do it because they want their name floating around in the minds of people. But if you're doing it for the right reason, you're always guaranteed the answer within like 24 hours from people all over the world. So you can see
It's
how
really
people in the
awesome.
US are responding to this, how people in different markets are responding to certain scenarios, and that's those three communities help you out a lot. I
Really
mean,
cool.
it just gives you the chance to test what you're thinking before you do it. I also set up a Slack channel with a couple of competitors of mine, who are all similar age in companies. I know we're talking about leadership, from a business leading perspective. They're direct competitors. Like we do compete against them, but in the sense of we share ideas to each other, we share resources to each other, because we can't all, buy every training program. So we'll buy one, we'll
Yeah.
share resources to them, and vice versa. And I think doing that healthy kind of competition side of things, even taking it on the internal side, I'm a big advocate for cooperatives. So even if you've got a company that is your direct competitor in hiring, reach out to them and see what are they doing that's slightly
100%.
different. I think that's going to be one of the biggest parts of growth for leaders. Scale it right back to kind of that first initial stepping up into the leading role. What steps, let's put the blueprint as it were, what steps would you recommend someone takes to prepare themselves? So find a mentor, be open to feedback, do the continuous learning. That they're the pillars that we created. But let's say I'm listening to this and going, hell yeah, like this is for me. How can I position myself ready for the move?
I think also ask for more responsibility. That's also, it feels quite a basic piece of advice, but I think anything where you can take on some of your manager's tasks to alleviate their pressure, where it's possible. So maybe doing reporting, presenting at different meetings in their state on their behalf. It could also be mentoring juniors in the team, situations where you can show that you are able to take more of a senior step or an advisory role beyond just being an operational individual contributor who, doesn't have that more expansive set of responsibilities. And this will also give you an opportunity to see beyond what you see as this bobblehead, talking on the screen every day. It's not going to necessarily give you insight into the very personal issues, because that's something only your manager can deal with. But you can talk to them about it and how they would go about handling these situations. I think the point is that you should put yourself out there and really ask for that responsibility and ensure that you can execute well on that, so that the next time there's a consideration for a leadership role, they do have a sense that you would be able to manage, at least at that level. Everything beyond that can be coachable.
So kind of put yourself out there, ask for responsibility. And I guess it's also the trial aspect. If you don't like the reporting side, and yes, reporting is part of leadership as much as we don't want it to be. But if you like things like that, you don't like that, then maybe the path isn't really what you want to do. If that sort of stuff. But I guess you can kind of test certain components of it.
Exactly. You can test it out, because really the last thing you want to do is step into that role and you just have no idea what's going on. I think that's really, it's like a bucket of ice water. You're just not prepared.
What would you say from your experience makes a high performing recruitment team? A little bit off topic on this, but I'm just curious now that you've led some.
I have to say, that one team, they were absolute angels. So super high performing. Teamwork. Gosh, that sounds cliche, doesn't it? But really it's teamwork, putting your own ambitions aside to take one for the team, really. We had people who were off sick for extended periods of time. There was the war, had a handful of Ukrainian team members who are affected at the time with that team. And sometimes we just need to pitch in for each other. Someone's overwhelmed, someone is just, they can't work for a while. It doesn't matter. It's a role you've never done before. It's a stakeholder you've never worked with. We just drop everything and we pull together and we find a solution. So really put your own ambitions aside to make things work for the good of the team. Also, by having that vulnerability with your team, they can also get a sense of how much you need them to pull together to make things work, because you are being honest with them about what's really going on behind the scenes. And sometimes, along with putting one's ambitions aside, you just need to get things done. It's not going to be the prettiest, fanciest work, but you just get whatever needs to be done. Also, this team needs to be very attuned to what is going on data-wise. So they're always looking forward. They're looking back to learn, not to ruminate on what was done wrong. So here we see, look at the numbers, always look back at the numbers, not necessarily the emotions associated. Look back at the numbers, say goodbye to that, and move forward with your learnings and how you're going to achieve that. So very much numbers driven, because also when you're justifying to the business, what's happening with our performance, that's the only thing they're going to respond to. No one cares that you're sorry or that you're late. They want to see it on paper. Okay, what happened? What led to this result? And how are you going to improve on it?
Love that.
And empathy. We're all human beings. We are not employee number 21738, whatever. I think just, showing up as your authentic self. That's what we want for ourselves as well. And care about your team member beyond just, what they can bring to you during the 8 to 5. And what you can leech from them, but rather what you can also bring to them as a human being.
Appreciate that. And I'll wrap it up on that, because I think that's a nice end to kind of give people the chance to step into the leading role, and then kind of give you a little bit of a teaser of what you think creates that high performing team. Amanda, thank you so much for spending some time with me and for sharing your knowledge. If people want to come and say hello to you, connect with you and learn a bit more from you, where's the best place that they can find you?
Definitely LinkedIn. I'm a compulsive message checker. I need to work on that, have more digital detoxing. But I would say LinkedIn is the best. And that's, can take it from there.
Perfect. And I'll put your LinkedIn handle into the footnotes of this as well, so people can find you. But once again, I appreciate it. And thanks for running through parts of your talk. I think, if I'm wrong, did they record the talks or not? They sometimes do, but I'm not sure.
I think they did. I haven't received any links as yet, but I think so. I'd be interested to see the recording.
I was going to say, if I can find it by the time this goes live, I will also. No, you got to be proud of it. You obviously did all well, but they wouldn't have asked you. So
it's a great experience.
Good. I'm glad. But I appreciate, like I said, you jumping on. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And it was absolute pleasure to join you today.
Perfect. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.